This video is sponsored by Raycon. Alright, dog, the new Clips album, not to mention the new Tyler, just dropped, and GDLU and Alfredo 2, which has a picture of Tonkatsu Ramen on the cover for some reason, are also set to drop this summer. Along with that, yet to be named Joey album that still doesn't have a single to it. Like, I swear he's doing this on purpose, dog. Nobody in the history of history has ever been this intentionally bad at marketing. My point is you don't want to go the whole rest of the summer listening to the new heat with them old busted earbuds that you picked up from the gas station on the way to work because you lost your old ones at the gym or you dropped them in the toilet or something. So why don't you treat yourself to some Raycons this paycheck? Listen, y'all know I don't believe in promoting products that I don't use myself, and I've been rocking the everyday earbuds for a minute now because every time I tried earbuds in the past, the joints always fell out of my ears mid-lift or post dump, and now I'm walking around feeling deaf in one ear. My favorite features have got to be the active noise cancellation and the quick charge function, which gives you 90 minutes of battery life with just a 10-minute charge. That's like half a bread tube essay worth of battery life. Like, I literally use these every day when I'm cooking, when I'm cleaning up, working out, when I get the time. 2 kids, remember? I'm also really feeling this protective case. Like, look how slick it is, man. It's like the Cadillac developed earbud cases, and it supports wireless charging, so I don't even have to take them out the case to get that half a left tube video worth of charge on them that I mentioned earlier. So support your boy today by going to buyraycon.com/Lil Bill for 20% off site-wide. Brought to you by Raycon, of course. Get yourself something respectable for your ears, dog. Like, it's time to give them old busted things a break, man. Like, talk about scaring the maidens, man. For y'all that don't know what Blue Sky is, it's basically just Twitter for college grads, to keep it a buck. So yeah, there isn't a Trump voter in sight. But jokes aside, absent of the smooth brain, basement dwelling, hive mind style racism regurgitated directly from 10-year-old memes and stone toss comics that the Bluebird app has become known for since the living embodiment of divorced dad energy has taken it over, it really is just that. Twitter for people with BLM flags in their front yard. My point is, Blue Sky still falls into some of the same holes that any social media site does. Tribalism, engagement farming, and a bunch of people who assume that they're right so long as enough people agree with them. But back to the engagement piece for a second. One of the things that had become a staple of my feed back when I was really on that app like that were those question threads, which, for the record, I ain't really have an issue with, except when they start asking for stuff like my date of birth and my kid's middle name. I'm on to you, Jeffrey. The specific thread that I'm referencing asked men, and I'm assuming cishet men specifically, if they had ever been catcalled. And let me tell y'all, I, for one, was positively befuddled, baffled even, by the number of men who at least claimed that they had never been eye humped and wolf whistled like a Tex Avery cartoon. That was really inappropriate when you think about it. Who was letting us watch this stuff, man? But then I remembered where I'm from. I've spent the entirety of my life somewhere within the 30 to 35-ish mile radius between Trenton and Philadelphia. Point being, if the Northeast is known for nothing else besides, being home to some of the most racist minorities in the country, if we're discounting Texicans and white Cubans, obviously, it's how aggressive it is up here. We have aggressive weather, aggressive property taxes, and yes, aggressive women. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. The women, not the taxes and the weather part. I swear, if I never see another snowflake, I'll buy a Cybertruck. I'm lying about that part, but y'all get what I'm saying. All I'm saying is women in the Northeast know what they want, and they're not ashamed to let you know what they want, especially when what they want is you. My point is, being catcalled is basically a rite of passage where I'm from, to the point that most of us don't even recognize it. Matter of fact, one of my wife and I's first real interactions years before we started dating was her catcalling me for a button down that I had on, and she don't even remember it. That's how normalized it is up here. And most of it is pretty innocuous like that. Or At least again relative to where I'm from, it's innocuous. But then there's the weird stuff, stuff like strangers DMing you about your dick size, weird. Church girls pressing their breast against your pecs for what's supposed to be a holy hug. There's your biggest high school bully brushing her booty against your crotch between periods, or snow bunnies straight up grabbing it, because that's just what you do with black guys. Be as aggressive as possible, or else they won't give you the time. And if they don't respond, then the problem isn't with the way that you approach them. The problem is with them. My point is, I became a feminist pretty early in life, before I even knew what a feminist was, and well before I even knew what a leftist was, I'll tell you that much. And yeah, a big part of that was me spending the bulk of my time in the house with anywhere between like 2 and 4 or 5 single women at a time, depending on what year we're talking about, not including weekends, which I spent with my grandparents most times, but also because I experienced enough unsolicited advances by the time I was in high school that I could at least empathize with that part of many women's experience. I've been creeped on by girls my age and much older than me. Like, I'm in middle school and she's filling out her first FAFSA form older. I've gotten sexually suggestive comments from classmates as early as like 4th or 5th grade, which is why my mom didn't want me in public school, and also why I wanted to stay there very, very badly. I've been groped. I've been kissed without my consent. I've been coerced into sexual situations. Like that time an acquaintance basically tried to trick me into having sex with her by giving me a ride to class, but before that she stopped at her crib on the way, brought me inside, and then insisted that I come upstairs while she changed out of her work clothes, and I still halfway regret that I didn't take her up on that offer. You should have seen her, dog. You would understand. Or this other time at a party where I was posted up on the wall, as wallflowers are wont to do, and a different acquaintance whined and grinded on me until I was basically at full break and wouldn't let me leave until I was. Like, no lie, every time she felt me move, she just used her ass to pin me back against the wall. Matter of fact, at one point she basically stood up from being bent over, put her hands up on the wall like this, so that I was literally caged in by this 5.5-foot tall woman. That's Philadelphia for you folks. Now, the especially woke among y'all are probably saying, Bill, that's assault, dog, which I say, bet. But it wasn't until like around the first time that I started posting videos to this channel that I realized that. And I'm still not completely convinced that I understand that. And see, that last part is kind of what I want to get into with this, or at least part of it. The first part is the racial dynamic. Yeah, bitch about it somewhere else. But I think this is important because, like I've said in past videos, my experience with white women kind of scared me off from the Beckys before I was even that drinking age. But those are just the most extreme examples of what I'm talking about. Truth be told, the vast majority of unsolicited advances I've gotten have all been from black women. But again, I can't exactly say that they were unwanted, even if they were unsolicited. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, I'm not an attractive guy to a lot of folk. I mean, I am the spitting image of my mother after all. But I mean, come on, dog. I ain't foreign, man. Honey. Point being, you can go to any downtown of any major U.S. city and find like dozens of me on any given day. Black, white, Latino, Asian, or whatever. What I'm saying is I'm nowhere near drop dead gorgeous enough for that alone to be the reason I've been hit on more times than a speed bag. That said, every black man that I know, both on and offline, have at least one story like the ones I told up top. And we celebrate those stories. Walk into any black barbershop in America and I promise you somebody is regaling the crowd with their latest hoe/assault story. And as wild as some of my stories are, it pales in comparison to the things I've seen and heard my peers go through. Like the time my cousin got his cherry popped by his dad's ex. Yes, you heard me right.
You're a victim. Here we go, CSI.
Or when my other cousin was gifted the neighborhood harlot for his 13th birthday. And to this day, they will pull out the Always Sunny conspiracy chart to explain why they weren't raped. Which again, that's what that is, dog. But like I said, they're not unique, not by a long shot. When I shared that skeet I mentioned on my community post, the consensus ranged between I didn't clock it until you said something, or at least not until much later. And that's really what we're trying to get into here. I spent a lot of my time talking about how black men are perceived by the world, both in and out of community. But I and most other people honestly have spent the bulk of our time talking about one extreme, the violent extreme, the part where we're feared. But we don't spend nearly as much time talking about the other side, the fetishization side, talking about the way that black male sexuality is presented and interacted with by folk who are not black straight men, how it affects the way that we perceive our own bodies, and thereby how we wind up many times disconnecting from those bodies. I know that when y'all hear that, a lot of y'all are probably expecting me to air out those viral videos of women twerking or bending over in booty shorts within spitting distance of a toddler, and then tee-heeing and ha-haing about it while they upload the video for other weirdos to laugh along with them. But that's low-hanging fruit, like a white British man dressed like a children's show host presented himself as an authority on New York and Chicago crime lord because he hired a third-party site to DM some kid on r/NY State of Mind or Chiracology who claimed to have the dirt on Pop Smoke despite growing up in Mount Vernon. And I hope, pray to God, he got something to say about it, because he can come see me right here, dog. But what we're going to do is unpack why that happens and why the outrage over it is never nearly as vociferous as if the sexes were reversed. Black people, according to Western culture and thereby media, are inherently hypersexual. I don't know how many times I got to keep going over this, to the point that it's damn near impossible to objectify us. This I've talked about several times over the years, so I'm just going to say look at my old stuff because, again, I'm not repeating it. Within community, however, the story is a bit more nuanced. Due to a combination of patriarchy within community and that hypersexualization I mentioned earlier, there's a priority placed on protecting the innocence of black girls, even into adulthood, or at least the appearance of doing so is prioritized. So, like I said, black people have a bad habit of not taking essays seriously unless it's male on male, and even then it's less about the assault than it is about homophobia. This is why when black girls are sexualized, it's usually that girl that shoulders the brunt of the blame. Yes, as young as toddlers, I've seen black girls getting creeped on, and it's because she's a little fast tail or she's too grown or whatever, and the blame is never kept on the creeps that we keep around as company within our households. Again, this goes back to the hypersexualization of black women by white supremacy. Society says that this is what black femininity is, a desperate desire for dick before you're out of diapers. You're just destined to be a hoe because society said so. So now it's on the village to ensure that you don't become a self-fulfilling prophecy, even if that means combating your own nature. And see, this is where the dissonance comes in, because in blaming the girl for her own sexualization, you're admitting that white supremacy might have a point about all of the juvenile Jezebels running around at the family reunion. What you're saying is black girls are everything whiteness says they are, but we're doing our damnness to either one, overcome that, or two, keep it a secret, or at least within community. Again, according to white folks, this is just what black girls are. Whether it's a product of nature or nurture or some combination of the two, there is no preventing or unlearning black female sexualities. There's just exploiting it. As someone who's much more educated on this topic than I pointed out to me not too long ago, this is why the same people who hired Meg Thee Stallion for a Marvel show cameo will turn around and then endorse the most misogynistic mofos in the country that sit on the bench and outlaw reproductive rights. Yes, I'm talking about Disney, dog. It's respectability by another name, basically, and that name is patriarchy. The stone cold reality is patriarchy, even when practiced by black people, is still being done through a white lens, or at least it is in white supremacist societies like this one right here. Thus, whereas a white woman's sexuality is something to be preserved, a black woman's is something to be prevented. We're not protecting our girls from the predators, we're protecting them from themselves. Again, white girls, at least as far as I know, don't get the whole you are asking for a treatment at least until they're teens. So after puberty. And that ain't a coincidence to me, man. Black girls just don't know better than to follow their hypersexual instincts, which causes them to fall victim to creeps even in prepubescence. Again, at EOD, if something does happen, it's your own fault for not learning how to curb your cravings. So what then does any of this have to do with black boys and by extension black men? well, everything. Duh, nigga. Because due to the same combination of patriarchy and anti-blackness, black male-appearing people exist at the polar opposite of the spectrum. Patriarchy tells us that one of the markers of manhood is sexual prowess. I've said this in that two-parter I mentioned earlier, that absent of the means to protect and provide, which black men have historically been denied, the next best thing is slinging. So historically, again, many of us overcompensate through more superficial means. Our sexuality, namely, and probably chiefly, honestly. This combined with white supremacy's historical depiction of black men as hypersexual to the point of being, hyper-violent man-beast is what facilitates the creation of those creeps that sneak peeks at toddler cheeks. It's just in our nature, boys being boys and whatnot. It's a perfect storm of head-assery where you have black girls who are just born to be bed wenches, doing their damnness to resist that, and black boys who are just acting out on their instinct. So yeah, even if it is taboo, even if it's not necessarily accepted, you can at least make it make sense why a grown-ass man will find anything appealing about a preteen girl. And listen, this theory, just like any other that can be presented, is primarily anecdotal, so it isn't anywhere near airtight, but it does serve to provide context for how and why we understand and thereby practice sexuality as black people. About a year ago, I talked about Lil Tyler being a case study on many of the things I'm going to talk about in this video. For y'all that don't know, Lil Tyler is a rapper, heavy on the quotations there, who went viral in part because of the combination of his age and how age inappropriate his presentation was. For example, Law & Order, the song that he went viral for at 16, specifically name drops people like Jada Waiter and Ruby Rose, who have made a name for themselves leading the working class revolution that y'all just ain't been paying enough attention to. I promise y'all they have. Now listen, I spent like a week earlier this year using my community post to give flowers to folk like Roxy Reynolds and Jasmine Cashmere. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I was a choir boy at that age. Now, I mean I was, but y'all know what they say about church kids, and none of it is wrong. That's low-key why I married one. That said, somebody clocked exactly what I'm getting at early enough to capitalize on it, which is why and how Tyler wound up performing his song Jada Waiter in a strip club parking lot. Now, why was he in the lot and not in the club itself, you may be asking? Because he wasn't old enough to get in. If you're disappointed by the lack of bare booty cheeks, don't be, because there's a whole pole dance happening in that video within spitting distance of, again, a minor at this point. Again, this isn't an isolated stunt with this kid. He's been depicted in sexual situations in past videos with who I have to assume are older women. I mean, legally they have to be, duh, nigga, but that's the rub. Part of the appeal of his presentation is that Tyler himself is a conventionally handsome young man, or at least as conventionally handsome as black people can be, with good hair at that. Good hair in quotations. It's like the Bow Wow effect on Fent, basically. If y'all remember that far back, the plot to basically every Bow Wow video was he being creeped on by much older girls. Some of them damn near grown, but it's okay because, oh, look at the little cute boy with the cornrows and a headband Harlem shaking up and down the basketball court. Half the hooks to his songs are literally telling the audience how desirable this 14-year-old boy is. And yes, I do know that Bow Wow was targeted primarily to preteens, and he's not anywhere near the first black male teeny bopper. I mean, Mike is sitting right there. But in the context of the way black boys and their sexuality is both received and presented, I can't ignore the subtext of, again, a 14-year-old boy with grown-ass women swimming half-naked in a giant dog bowl, singing about wanting to take him home with them. Like, is that not weird to any of y'all? So why then are we surprised about Lil Tyler professing his undying admiration for BBL bandits in a strip club parking lot again? This was just the natural progression from Bow Wow. We just didn't notice it until it became explicit, and that's kind of the problem, right? I remember many times of being creeped on by girls much older than me, even my sister clocking it and keeping some of her acquaintances a safe distance away from me as a result. It's okay for black boys to be preyed upon because that's not the way that it's perceived within community. Getting the attention of an older woman is something to be celebrated. It's something to be desired. It's, again, sort of a rite of passage for many black boys. You're not a man until a woman, not a girl, but somebody with a discernible bust line shows interest in you, whether you're ready for that or not. That's just what it is. That's the double standard of black male and female sexuality. When black girls get creeped on, it's their own fault for being too fast. But when black boys are preyed upon, well, you can't prey upon a black boy. You can't prey upon a black boy. That's kind of what I'm getting at here, right? I mean, you can't get hard if you don't like it, after all. And if you like what's happening, how can you call it rape? And if you don't like what's happening, again, the problem isn't with what's happening. The problem is with you. Boys of a certain age just have natural urges that must be satisfied at some point, or else they'll spontaneously combust or something. And I mean, how can one person be right and the whole rest of the culture be wrong? Also, OJ Simpson has entered the chat from beyond the grave. Somehow, what is this, voodoo or something, nigga? So yes, there is a double standard in the way that we talk about black male and female sexuality. That is to say that if we protect our girls poorly, then we don't protect our boys at all, except from other boys. But I talked about why that was up top. Again, it's homophobia. That's how you get those twerk shows at toddler birthdays. That's how you get Young Miami's son making it rain and slapping a grown woman's jiggling backside during his 6th birthday. That's how you get Blueface forcing his son away from his video game to see some of the most mid strippers that I've ever seen on a stream.
You ain't gay, is you?
It's a generational curse in the black community, one that's passed down from black male to black male. This is how you become and what makes you a man, an insatiable appetite for ass from the time that you learn to wipe your own. All right, so going back to that incident that I had mentioned earlier, or at least one of them, I hadn't ever been pinned to a wall like that before, but I had been in similar situations. This is probably definitely TMI, but it's not hard for me to get hard, pun intended. So I've had it where a girl was dancing on me and nature began calling. So me being the neurodivergent introvert that I am, I just stopped moving with her and began to recall every past Super Bowl loser in my head from memory. I can only assume that she took that to mean that she wasn't doing her part to keep me interested. So she pinned my hands to her hips, at which point I snatched them away and walked to the other side of the room and then got clowned by all my friends for it. That wasn't manly. It wasn't alpha. I didn't match her energy. I failed to match her freak, which might be worse than not getting the energy at all. So the next time I learned my lesson and just took it all in stride, because I'm not going to lie and say that I like being restrained by booty, at least in that context, but I did like the symbolism, even if I didn't realize that's what it was. Here is this attractive, age-appropriate girl showing me and the rest of the room, for that matter, how desirable I was in just about as public a manner as possible. It told me and every other person present that even if just for that moment, I was the alpha, I was the most masculine thing in that room, even if it cost me my autonomy. That's the exchange we make as black men. Again, because historically we're denied the resources to protect and provide, we offer our bodies in exchange for worthiness. Friend of the channel and past collaborator Herbie said this in my Black Men in Drag video, but white men have the privilege of moving in and out of their sexuality as they please. And if you've ever been in a locker room or a boarding situation with white boys, then you already know what I'm talking about. I ain't got to go no further. Again, this is because their masculinity isn't dependent on their sexuality or even just their physicality. Like I said in that video, a white boy can be as effeminate or literally as queer as he wants to be and still pull rank on the biggest black buck in the room, so long as he has the dollars to match it. Black men can't do that because no matter how much money we make, we are still viewed through the lens of white supremacy, which says that we are inherently hypersexual, hyper-hetero even. Don't believe me? Then why was the first part and really the only part of the Diddler case that a bunch of people paid any attention to was all of the gay stuff, when there are literal crimes being committed throughout it, including an alleged attempted hit on a guy? Like y'all see how dissonant that is? So not only are we denied the privilege of fluidity, we're denied the privilege of innocence as well. Our very being is sexualized from an age so young most of us don't remember the first time that we were. It is that very sexualization that made Emmett Till possible. Nobody even thought to question this story about a black boy whistling suggestively at an older white woman, because of course he did, nigga. Haven't you heard of Mandingo? I've talked about the dehumanization of black boys in the past in regards to violence against us again, but I also talked in the past about how when we do talk about dehumanization, it's almost always limited to just violence. To keep it a buck, the vast majority of dehumanizing experiences that I've had weren't violent, or if they were violent in the context of sex. In addition to everything I said up top, I've had white boys, straight white boys, basically offer to pay me to sleep with a girl that they either couldn't or didn't think that they can get. Matter of fact, I was literally told by one of them, dude, you don't have to date her, just F her. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has ever had an experience like that. Like I said, a lot of cishet white males like to live vicariously through the bodies of black men, especially the ones who treat sex like a power fantasy. The pleasure for these guys is as much in the act itself as it is the power they feel from the conquest.
I am so lonely.
I talked about this before as it pertains to the language we use when talking about sex. If you go onto any adult site right now, you will see words or phrases like dominated, destroyed, impaled. Many times you'll see so-and-so versus BBC. The implication is one of domination, of power, of violence even. And for many, there's no better way to live out that fantasy than through a big black dick. But again, that's just one and really a small aspect of the things that I really wanted to get into with this video. Really, I wanted to get into how this plays in the dynamic between black men and the women, or I mean, I guess if you're not straight, anybody who we choose to get involved with, and how it reflects in their attitudes and their behaviors toward us, including the whole playing of the game thing. If you don't know what I mean by playing the game, I'm talking about both men and women applying and denying pressure even when none is needed. Think of it like interviewing for an internal promotion. If you have or do find yourself in that position, barring something catastrophic, you probably have the inside track for that position. That said, you still have to give your manager one final reminder why they considered you over an outside candidate in the first place. As a result, the line between consent and coercion gets a lot murkier than what a lot of us would like to admit online. Olay talked about the female side of this in her Aziz Ansari video, so y'all can go watch that at some point. But I'll focus on the male side here. I can't really speak to anyone else's experience but my own. I know I keep bringing up the neurodivergent thing because it matters, so shut the F up and listen. I've never been good at playing the game, like at all. Like, I'm not going to keep dropping stories of awkward sexual advances that I've received because a lot of you niggas are going to swear I'm either capping or humble bragging because you're low-key kind of insecure about your own experiences or lack thereof, if we're going to keep it a buck. But my point is, I'm basically oblivious to this kind of stuff, which is the big reason why I didn't start dating, let alone fooled around until I got to college. And even then, it was only because after a few weeks of knowing each other and of increasingly suggestive comments and text messages to each other, the girl that I was talking to just straight up asked me if we were effing or not. I'm not going to sit here and act like I didn't want to, because I most definitely did, but I didn't really intend, or at least didn't intend for it to happen that way. I was just matching her energy, playing the game, if you will, but evidently she wasn't playing around, and I thank God for that. My point is, even if the initiator, I have almost never been the aggressor in any relationship I've had, casual or serious. Literally, like 2 weeks before my wife suggested that we be a couple, she went through a laundry list of questions that just boiled down to, do you have hoes? Again, we weren't technically dating at this point, and even if we both kind of knew that we liked each other like that. And despite all of this, I still never pulled the trigger. She was the one who straight up said, let's just be together already. My insistence on very clear verbal consent has probably, definitely cost me a romantic partner or two. Not that I'm counting. I'm just trying to make a point that the whole consent is sexy thing sounds good online, but in my personal experience, and I'm pretty sure most of y'all's, it's not nearly that cut and dry, and we need to stop acting like it is. I have had it where my insistence on continuous verbal consent and affirmation came off less courteous than it did corny. And I promise you, I'm not the only one again. So what we need to do, men and women, is stop picking which side of the mouth to speak from based on who's listening at that time. So going back to Olay's video, without spoiling too much, she made the point that at least part of the reason we get Azizes is because of the way that we treat women's sexuality, whether it's preservation or prevention or something in between. Women are not supposed to be openly sexual. They're not supposed to initiate, or if they do, they're supposed to be the baiter and not the baitee, if that makes sense. This is at least part of why the consent coercion line is so blurry, if we just going to be real now. If we allowed our girls to express their sexuality as openly and unrepentantly as our boys, then we might not have so many Azizes. There'd be a lot less awkward what do we do next moments in the car, on the couch, or wherever and whenever you get down. What I'm saying is, at the very least, Aziz wouldn't have an excuse, because when a girl says no, it would actually mean no, and be no every single time, and not no half the time and then no but also actually yes, but I don't want to seem like a floozy, so here's a wink and a grin to give you a hint to keep moving further. But this isn't even a thing for boys. It's accepted, even expected, for boys to be boys again, to express hypersexuality to some degree, and even those of us who don't know this is expected. This is why I lied about having a girlfriend who went to another school when I was in middle school. This is why I hid my virginity from my first college girlfriend. This is why I dated a girl for 2 days in high school who I wasn't even attracted to, just because this is what was expected of me, and not having one at that time would have made me deviant. This is just what it is for black boys, and why so many of us disconnect from our bodies to the point you have people like my cousins who even in their 30s and 40s can't process the idea that they were raped by older woman. Again, if y'all watching, that is what that is. As a black boy, you don't get a choice in the matter. This is who you are, because this is what it's always been. And we never really bothered to address, let alone change that, until we saw the impact it had on any and everybody besides black boys themselves. And even then, we didn't so much address it as we acknowledged it and just said black men do better, without any clear way of doing so, while while also maintaining our preconceived understanding of what black manhood is. I know the phrase "nobody cares about black boys" is kind of a loaded statement, but am I wrong though? The intersection between sex, race, and womanhood is such a hot topic that entire channels on this very site are dedicated solely to it. And I'm not going to hold you and say that that's a bad thing. Matter of fact, it's necessary. But my point is, you just don't see that kind of care being given to black men's sexuality, especially not on this side of the internet. The most we get is, don't be a creep and it's okay to be queer. But we don't really spend a lot of time really unpacking black male sexuality, what it is, and just as important, why it is. And when we do, it's usually done in passing to support a greater point, like I did in the trap whore video. My point is, even if we don't necessarily care about our girls, we do care about what they're doing. And we can go over any number of reasons why that is. But the point is, we care about their sexuality enough to talk about it as nauseum, as its own thing, and not just a smaller part of a greater whole. We care enough that this is just what it is isn't good enough when we talk about them. We have to talk about why it is, and when we've run out of stuff to talk about, we watch and read other people make points we didn't think to think about, or more often than not, ones we already made, but we just want to hear somebody else say it for validation. This is why just a few months ago, my homepage was like half Pound Town apologists and half "this is the problem with black culture" videos by biracial kids who have never seen a group of 3 or more niggas in one place at one time in real life. My point is, whether we're teaching our girls to free themselves from the white man's patriarchal lens of black femininity and using Meg Thee Stallion as the standard of a sexually liberated black woman, or we're telling them to not become a sentient stereotype and using Sexy Red as an example of that, the point is, when it comes to black women's sexuality, we don't stop at "this is just what it is." We not only unpack the way, but we make moves to unlearn the way. We don't do that for our boys. This is where a lot of online progressives lose me, in that we have a bad habit of talking about black men more often as a concept than we do as an individual. And worse than that, in a way that isn't targeted directly at them in any way that isn't antagonistic. This is why you get, "why are black men voting Republican every election cycle?" or "black men don't marry black women despite the research saying otherwise, even in the upper education and income brackets." This is, in my opinion, part of the reason why when we have the black women are 2.2 times more likely than white women to be victims of IPV, we conveniently leave out the part about how gay and bisexual black women are much more likely to be victimized than straights. That's because, let's keep it a buck. Like, no shade to some of my smaller black cishet male cornbreaders, but to my knowledge, it's just me, Feek, Foreign, and Cam James are the only cishet black men who's both been silver plaqued and spend this much time talking to black men about black men's issues without sounding like a Blue Sky thread or a red pill stream. Black men have not been all that visible in this space until recently, and that is mostly our fault, to be honest. But it goes back to something I keep saying. Most leftists aren't actually leftists. They just use leftism as a means to access the privilege that their marginalization has denied them. Thus, we not really all that pressed about anybody that isn't a part of our own personal interest group until they impact that interest group directly. Like, how many videos and articles and pods and whatever else have you seen about the dearth of black men in HBCUs? How many of those at least featured a black man, a straight black man, talking about these issues? I mean, I know Olay did, but personally, I can't think of too many others, and that's because most of us won't make the effort to talk to straight black men about straight black men's issues. And if we do, it's only a certain kind of straight black man, the kind who's just going to co-sign whatever implicit bias we already hold against straight black men. And no, I'm not just talking about the anime watcher hairlines either. I'm talking about the progressive niggas who don't actually talk to niggas but think that they know everything about niggas because they are niggas. Yes, the very smart brothers of the world. And I mean, listen, it is what it is. I get it when we're talking about the goofies bitching about Dochi, but I personally feel when we talk about black men's issues as they they pertain specifically to black men, we need to put as much care into that as we do the umpteenth thousand think piece on a municipal primary election. And yes, I am talking about that one, nigga. Black boys are stripped of humanity both in and out of community at a very, very young age. We're told basically from the time that we're able to talk, one, if not both, of this is what you are and this is what you must be. Thug, criminal, gangster, womanizer, deadbeat, husband, father, entrepreneur, inspirational story. And we build our entire identity on either achieving or defying or even failing to meet those expectations. That's why the story I told y'all about that girl at the party would have been a pretty cut and dry case of assault, or at least harassment, had the roles been reversed. But because I am a straight man, a large straight black man at that, not only was it accepted, but it was celebrated, not just by my peers, but by myself. Again, I can't be mad at the girl because she genuinely, I feel, did not know any better. This is what she had been taught black men are. And in order to get what she wanted from this boy, whether it is sex or just my attention, she had to affirm my manhood. And the best way to do that was to appeal to my sexuality and to do so as explicitly, even as aggressively as possible. Whether by nature or by nurture or some combination, we are expected to be openly, sometimes even aggressively sexual beings at all times. That's just what it is for black men. On the flip side, there's an argument that what she did had nothing to do with me specifically at all. It could have been any random nigga at that party. I just so happened to be the one that she picked that night. It can be argued that the fact that she not only kept going but became more aggressive as she felt me becoming aroused was her affirming her own desirability, and I was just the object that she used to do so. It doesn't matter how comfortable you are or not. Matter of fact, you should be enjoying this just as much, if not more than me, nigga, as any real man would. Again, I didn't get a choice in how, when, or even where my sexuality was being expressed, let alone with whom. This is just what it is again. When I see these conversations about teaching boys not to be predators, it sounds a lot like teach them to curb their impulses, which again implies that this is just what we are. Again, regardless of why it is, this is the reality. And that's the priority at that point. And yeah, I don't disagree, but I also think it's just as important to unpack why it is. And we don't do that nearly enough. Why do boys feel like sex is a right? Why do we become hostile, sometimes even violent, when we're denied that right? It's because we're taught, and we still teach our boys, that this is what a man is and what a man does. And by denying them access to that, we deny them manhood and thereby selfhood. This is especially true, again, of black boys who have been denied the privilege of being provider and protector. I don't know how many times I got to say that. So then sex and our access to it now becomes the primary means of accessing manhood and thereby selfhood. I allowed myself to be objectified, is what I'm saying, because that objectification was my avenue to masculinity. You are not a man until the community says so, and they say so by affirming your desirability. It's not the sex in a vacuum, it's what that sex symbolizes. A woman has deemed me worthy and thereby validated my manhood. The more attractive she is, or the greater number that do, the more of a man I am than the next guy. My body is just the means I use to achieve manhood, is what I'm saying. So this then creates an environment in which black men and boys can and are taken advantage of and are none the wiser. It's why you have stories like my cousins and even my own of being abused by much older women with little if no consequence coming to those women. This is how you get Boozy paying for his teenage sons to be topped off, or Too Short teaching his son how to commit SA. This is how you get Lil Wayne and Usher and a plethora of other black boys who lost their virginities to much older women, thanks in part to older men facilitating it. And speaking of Usher, that's kind of exactly what I'm talking about. We kind of missed, or at least glossed over, that part of the Diddy thing because we were too busy getting our jokes off about Meek. Again, black men don't matter in a vacuum. We only matter in the context of how we impact the people around us, specifically sexuality in this case. Whether we're scolded for how it impacts black women or exploited for the benefit of white ones and low-key a lot of black ones to keep it a buck. Black men don't matter until we matter to somebody else. And that's what the whole point of this video is about and what I'm trying to push back against. Listen, there's a lot to unpack about black men's sexuality. More than can be covered in, what's this going to be, like a 45 out of the 60-minute long video. But my point with this one is to say, I don't think it's fair or productive to just say black men do better and keep it moving. And because it doesn't address the issues lying at the root of why we aren't doing better in the first place. It reminds me of something Bell Hooks says about learning to love maleness instead of manhood. It's wild to me how many of the books some folk claim to have read, and yet y'all either missed or ignored the parts that didn't just sound like your own thoughts being said out loud. I think that part is missing severely in this space. And I'm not saying I'm the one to change it because no one person can do it with anything, to be honest. But perhaps this will encourage some of us to start being a bit more honest about how we interact with black manhood, including our own. Now, if you excuse me, there is some ass to be had in the other room. Deuces, nigga.